Welcome to the OR Sports High School Football Wrap-Up Show. I am Sports Editor Chris Dugan. With me again this week, Assistant Sports Editor Joe Tuscano. We're going to have an interesting show for you this week. We have a lot of things to talk about. We're going to talk about playoff clinchings. Joe, all the games last week, we only had one local team clinch a playoff spot.
Yeah, how unusual is that? And it was Fort Cherry clinched the playoff spot with a win over Mapletown. That was supposed to be a nice showdown between the legs of Dylan Rush, who went over 4,000 yards in his career a couple games ago, against one of the better defenses we have in Class A in Fort Cherry. It never materialized. The first time Rush touched the ball, he tweaked an ankle, had to come out of the game, and it was an injury that he had sustained in practice earlier in the week, and not severe enough that it'll keep him out for any length of time, but you know, without him in the lineup, Fort Cherry just kind of rolled over them.
Fort Cherry has made it 7 local teams in the playoffs. We're guaranteed of having at least 3 more in the Tri-County South, 1 more in the Big 9 Conference in 4A, and at least 1 more in the Century Conference in AA. We'll also be talking about the game of the century. That's the game between Washington and Chartiers Houston last week. They played for first place in the Century Conference. We'll also preview some games this week. The marquee game will be played on this field behind us at Carmichaels High School. Carmichaels will be playing Fort Cherry. That game will be for the Tri-County South Conference Championship. We'll also have an interesting interview with Carmichaels head coach Ryan Krull. Joe will be doing that. You'll want to stay tuned for that. But first, Joe, let's talk about comebacks. There were 2 comebacks last week involving local teams, both from the Mon Valley, and they were stunners. I would say one of them might have been the best comeback a team from Washington or Greene County ever had. When you throw the circumstances and the amount of time was left on the clock, might have been the best comeback ever.
You just don't see this happen in high school football. It was Ringgold was trailing 26-14 at the time.
There was less than 10 seconds left in the game, and Ringgold's down by 12 points. Ringgold wins the game in regulation. In regulation, they drive 80 yards and they score on a George Martin 2-yard run with 8 seconds left. But on that play is when it started to fall apart for West Mifflin. And we have to add, West Mifflin was undefeated entering this game.
Right. And what happened was that they were penalized. West Mifflin was penalized for a personal foul penalty. So they added it on to the kickoff, which goes from the 40 of Ringgold to the 45 of West Mifflin, which is where Ringgold kicked off. They tried an onside kick and recovered it with 7 seconds left. And on that play, there was another penalty for a personal foul against West Mifflin, which moved the ball down to the 17, and that's where George Martin hit Octavius Vassar for a 17-yard touchdown as time expired.
And Joe, I might add that was a really good throw by George Martin. He was chased out of the pocket, rolled to his right, and found Vassar between 3 Westmoreland defenders.
Yeah, and interestingly, because of the Gardner point system, they had to go for the extra point. Disinterested West Mifflin team was like, okay, go ahead. And Vermont Small went in for the 2-point conversion that made it a 29-24 win. 26 win. One
thing I wanted to add, a couple of summers ago, heard a lot about George Martin, the quarterback for Ringgold. He was the talk of the 7-on-7 camps. Everybody was saying, wait till you see this kid. He's dynamite. He's got all the skills. He can make all the throws. And since then, really, Ringgold has been a team that's where the running backs have been the big story. Martin's been a complimentary player. But against West Mifflin, Martin had a breakout game, 18 of 29 for 328 yards.
And the recruiters are going to notice that he's kind of been a little hamstrung with some, high school wide receivers. I don't want to make that sound critical, but it's when you've got a gun for an arm like that, sometimes it's hard to catch the passes. Sometimes, kids just aren't used to that. But the recruiters know that he's a good guy. He's strong. He's like, I believe he's 6'4" and 220 pounds. He can throw the ball 70, 80 yards downfield. And he's got a little bit of mobility, not a great deal, but enough that it's going to get him probably to Division II, maybe a low Division I level.
Another comeback was Saturday afternoon at Hill Memorial Stadium in Burgettstown. Charleroi was trailing 23-6 to Burgettstown in the middle of the third quarter. Burgettstown, all they had to do was win that game, and they set up a game for first place this week against Washington. But Gino Pellegrini, the sophomore quarterback at Charleroi, rallies the Cougars. They scored a game's final 20 points, went 26-23, and that's the first win in conference play for Charleroi, which is now at 500 overall. It has the Cougars right back in the playoff hunt. They have a big game this week against Beth-Center in Fredericktown. And for Burgettstown, that takes a lot of air out of that game against Wash High this week.
It does, and Burgettstown just has to be devastated to lose the lead like that. They played a Saturday afternoon game. I believe it's a homecoming tradition for them. And, you know, I just believe that there's something different about a Saturday game. When I played high school football in Newcastle, I hated those games because it just didn't have the same
Changes
feel.
your routine.
It does. It's an extra day. And I just hated to play those afternoon games. It was just a different feel to it, and I wonder if that affected Burgettstown.
The game of the century last week had Chartiers Houston hosting Washington. The winner would have sole possession of first place in the Century Conference. Washington was undefeated, but entered the game a half game behind Chartiers Houston. It was a tale of two halves. First half, Chartiers Houston dominates, but only has a 6-0 lead at halftime. Chartiers Houston came out, had the passing game combination of T.J. Johnston, the A.J. Myers clicking. They hit for a long touchdown, took the 6-0 lead. Chartiers Houston, the last three possessions, they started all of them in Wash High territory, but didn't score on it. They turned the ball over on downs at the 2-yard line. They had an interception in the end zone. They had the ball at the 3-yard line. Johnson threw a pass to Myers, who was open in the end zone, but Isaiah Schoonmaker, the outside linebacker, who's a very good player for Washington, made a leaping interception to end that. Chartiers Houston's defense, Trey Lober was just dominating the game at the line of scrimmage in the first half. Washington had only 30 yards rushing, and Washington decided at halftime, we need to change some things. So they trotted out that single wing offense that they used last year with a lot of success, and it was a gamble because they took Connor Badillion, who's their quarterback, who has 12 touchdown passes, no interceptions this year. They took him out of the game, put 4 running backs in the backfield, used a lot of direct snaps, but it changed the game for a couple of reasons. One was it changed the blocking assignments up front for Wash High. It moved the left tackle to left guard to center because he was the long snapper, and put a bigger body in front of Lober. It kind of neutralized him. And it also caused a lot of confusion with the Chartiers Houston defense. There's a lot of misdirection, handoffs, fake handoffs, snaps to different players in the backfield. And it took probably 3 series for Chartiers Houston to get used to that on defense. And another thing that made it the perfect time to try this for Wash High, Chartiers Houston didn't play in the conference last year with Wash High. Chartiers Houston was in Class A, so they had never seen Wash High use this offense. Prexies hadn't used it at all this year. Wash High ends up running for 220 yards in the second half alone. They get 3 touchdown runs from 3 different players, a touchdown pass from Ronnie Paith, who was sort of the quarterback in the shotgun wildcat formation, and Wash High pulls away and wins 28-6. Prexi's still unbeaten. They've won 27 straight regular season games. Now, a team that's going to be in first place after Friday night is going to be either Carmichaels or Fort Cherry. They're going to play for first place in the Tri-County South. And Joe Tuscano, you had an interview with Ryan Krull a few minutes ago. Let's listen to that.
All right, I'm Joe Tuscano, assistant sports editor, and I'm here with Ryan Krull, the head football coach of Carmichaels. And we are at the point now to play the game that everyone's been looking at on that schedule. And but before we get into the details of that, I just wanted to go over a little bit about the season. Can you talk a little bit about the development of the team and where you think they've made some strides since week 1?
Yeah, well, you know, we started week 1 probably like any other team. You You go back and review the film, and we were sloppy in a lot of areas. I thought we cleaned a lot of it up going into week 2. Played a good opponent in Olsh, and obviously didn't clean it up enough. But I think really since that point, and we talked to them, obviously there was disappointment because of the last week too, but we said, hey, let's use this as a positive. Let's look at the things that we didn't do well. Let's get better at the things we didn't do well. And then if we make, that negative into a positive, then we've done our job. And I think, week by week, we have gotten better.
You've used a lot of people in the backfield. Your running game has been really, really good. You've controlled games that way. And you have a tremendous offensive line, I think, has played well throughout the season. Can you tell us a little bit about the building that line and what it took?
Yeah, really, that starts in January, where those guys learn how to win in the trenches, and I credit, our coaches for our off-season, strength and conditioning program, credit our players for the hard work and the hours they put in. A lot of times people just see product on the field and they really don't understand all the hours and all the minutes and all the work that's really gone into it. So really it started in January, continues through the spring, into the summer, and then into the fall. But in terms of touches from guys in the backfield, we have so many guys that I think are deserving to touch the ball, so many guys that do things a little bit differently in terms of how they run. So, we just feel it gives our guys and our team the best opportunity to win when we let multiple guys touch the football. And, I'll say this about our pass game. With some of the weather, like in the California game, we weren't able to throw it around as much as we wanted. But our guys on the outside really have done a good job. And even though we haven't thrown the ball a ton, we've had some really big plays from our guys from the outside. So it's really been, a combination of things. It all starts with the quarterback, with Johnny Christopher, and then with the offensive line in terms of pass protection or blocking for the run game, and then trickles down to the skill guys and then making the plays that they need to make.
Now, every coach looks for some kind of a point in a season that unifies the team, and you had something that went on a couple of weeks ago where everybody on the team, including yourself, got their haircuts to show their support for one of the, I believe, a middle school student who's ill.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that decision and how you think that team kind of came together in that issue?
Yeah, so, when I was made aware of it, it was actually one of our elementary students, Braden Wasco. When I was told, about his illness, the first thought from me was, what can we do to help? And, when I was talking to his brother, he said that one of the biggest things he was worried about was shaving his head. So, I pitched it to our guys, talked to him in the locker room, and when I asked him, I said, told him, this is something that's optional. Nobody obviously has to do this, but as soon as I put it out there for them to go ahead and give the green light, I mean, guys are, coach, mark me down, coach, mark me down, coach, I'm doing it. So initially we had over 30 guys, right out of the gate saying they were going to do it, and then from that point on, another one or two would trickle in and say, yeah, coach, I'm on board with this. And I'll say we were unified prior to that. It wasn't like, we were having a hard time with, guys kind of getting off track. But I would say that solidified things, even more. Here's a group of young men who are in their high school years, in their teenage years, and, appearance is everything.
Sure.
And, they put that to the wayside, that they understood. It was really an adult decision by them, not something you'll see many kids do. But they put all that stuff aside, and they really understood why we were doing it, what we were doing it for. And I was extremely proud. It's most proud, I told them this is the most proud I've ever been to be associated with a team as a player or coach.
Now, you got a game coming up with Fort Cherry. The last time you played was a 2013 playoff game. There was Fort Cherry won 13-12. I believe that you went for the 2-point conversion at the end of the game after scoring, and Brennan McMahon came up just a little bit shy. Can you talk a little bit about what type of team Fort Cherry is and what the challenges are to beat them?
I say they're a complete team. They run the ball, they throw the ball. They got some guys on the outside that are really big play guys. They do a good job up front. They have some huge defensive ends. I don't know, of any time since I've been coaching that I've seen two defensive ends, that are both that big. But they'll run it, they'll throw it. Like I said, they're big play guys. But we'll just have to really buckle down and play, fundamentally sound football, because if we have a breakdown on just one play, that one play can be 6 for them.
Is this a fun week when you have a team like this coming in and you get them at home? Is it a fun week for you at practice? You notice the kids maybe are a little more livelier in what they're doing?
I'll say this: when you have the right group, it's more of a fun week. You have a group that's timid, that's scared about playing a good team. It's usually not a fun week because they're practicing, timid and scared. But I'm excited for our group. I know they're excited, and they've been lively. I think they're up for the challenge. We'll see Friday night. We tell them all the time, it's not about what you're saying; it's about what you're doing. But to this point, yeah, it has been exciting. It's been exciting for us. It's been exciting for Carmichaels in general.
Kickoff is 7 o'clock. You make sure you get down here, or shame on you for 6 weeks. Ryan, thanks for taking the time, and wish you all the luck the rest of the season.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd also like to thank Ryan for spending some time with us. Fort Cherry, Joe, undefeated. One of 3 local teams that are undefeated. We had 4 entering last week, but Belle Vernon dropped by the wayside. Belle Vernon went to Thomas Jefferson and lost 55-0 last week to the Jaguars. TJ, 64-1 at home, the last 65 home games. The one loss was last year to Belle Vernon. And the Jaguars extracted a little bit of revenge and then some last week.
You think they remembered that one loss? Because that's the only time they've beaten them in the last 10 years. And I'm sure that Bill Churpak let them know about it that whole week leading up to that game. And he didn't
probably let them know about it all summer.
Probably. And he didn't take the foot off the gas on that game. It was 55-0 Mercy Roll. They got their revenge.
Yes. The other undefeated teams, we mentioned Fort Cherry. South Fayette is undefeated in the Northwest 9 Conference. The Lions can clinch the conference title this week with a win over Highlands. The other undefeated team is Washington. The Little Prexies can clinch the top playoff seed out of the Century Conference and at least a share of the conference title if they beat Burgettstown this week. But, Joe, Burgettstown has a history of beating undefeated Washington teams in the last week of the season. This isn't the last week, next to last,
right.
But Burgettstown's been in this situation before and pulled a shocking upset or two.
Well, and if it rains, Wash High should be really worried because they knocked off Wash High when Brian Davis was there.
That was at Burgettstown.
Their place. And
in the mud.
In the mud. And there are still some people from Washington who swear that they brought the fire trucks in and hosed down the field before the game, which, John Derrick denied.
Well, there will be no mud this week. The game's at Wash High Stadium where they have turf. Wash High will be the top seed in the playoffs if they get that win, no matter what they do next week against Beth-Center. Another team that can still get in the playoffs is Trinity. Trinity can grab one of the 4 playoff spots from the Big 9 Conference. Simply have to win 2 more games. They must beat Greensburg-Salem Friday night at Hiller Field, then beat Ringgold next week in the regular season finale at Joe Montana Stadium.
And Joey Caroli had a heck of a game against Albert Gallatin. It was a 46-14 win. He scored 3 different ways. He ran a ball in for a score. He caught a touchdown pass and returned an interception for a touchdown. And he's going to need a similar game like that if they're going to win out and get that playoff spot.
Joey Caroli's had 3 huge games this year, all against Fayette County teams. He owns Fayette County. Joe, we mentioned the Tri-County South, Carmichaels, Fort Cherry in a big game this week. Nobody in that conference has been eliminated from playoff contention. One team that really helped itself last week was West Green, winning for the first time at Monessen.
Yes, they were down 20-0, and came back and scored the final 29 points. Ben Jackson caught a touchdown pass with 5 seconds left to play to put that game away. That was the first win over a Monessen team by West Green since 1992. That was the year of Rodney Wilson and that group that went to the championship game. And, that kind of a win just bolsters you for the following week. And, West Green, if they can get into the playoffs, will be the first time since 1993.
West Green does not have a conference game this week. The Pioneers will be playing Western Beaver, but they end the season against third place California. That'll be an important game. So that does it for this week's show. Until next week, enjoy the games.